think y'all will take up the whole time. Just see the
Right.
time if you're done. But 8 minutes, so you can make whatever case you want to make. And the topic is, does a Christian God exist?
We'll go first.
Okay. And which one of y'all would like to start first?
Howdy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can if that's what you want.
Perfect. Hour and 45-minute timer starting now, and your 8 minutes is starting now. Go ahead and go, Howdy.
Okay. Lots to say. One, I don't think there is such a thing as the Christian God. A lot of people claim to be Christian. They claim that their God is the Christian God, and they are incompatible with each other. I would like, presumably almost none of them understand the ontology of the Trinity. Everyone is a heretic of some shape or form. Even Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholics disagree, and from their systems, they would consider the other to be polytheistic or subordinationist. If you believe in EO's relational distinctions of the monarchia, and you can't have like a particular marker for each of the hypostases, then they're subordinated, either like it's shared between all or none. But I don't want to get into all that. So like, why not believe like of a God in general? Lots of things to say. One is that like positing like the positive existence of something carries with it the burden of proof. There haven't really been any good arguments for God in general. You can think of some. I mean, I don't think the arguments against it aren't that great either, but all things being equal, then you shouldn't. Hold on, let me get out of this game. You should not, if the arguments are equal. Okay. Like, it doesn't explain anything. Oh, okay. Here's the main reason not to, is that the existence of it is like sui generis and mysterious and ill-motivated. I think those are the three main reasons that I would remark on. So some fun arguments, I guess, against the position. Reverse modal ontological is like interesting, I guess. Necessarily, if God exists necessarily. Possibly God does not exist, therefore God does not exist. Joe Schmidt gave a paper recently about the symmetry breaker in favor of atheism, and that weaker modal logics that retain consistency between the possibly God and possibly not God premises are consistent only under the atheistic conclusion. One that's fun, since people are running moral arguments, I'll say something like objective morals. If God exists, objective morality does not exist. Objective morality exists, therefore God does not exist, by modus tollens. I think on most accounts, God grounded morality is subjective. What's another good one? So like an internal critique, I guess, specifically for Christianity would be the logical problem of evil. If God is all powerful, all knowing, and omnibenevolent, evil would not exist. Evil exists, therefore God doesn't have these characteristics. And if those characteristics are necessary for the Christian God, then the Christian God doesn't exist. Not sure what else to add. Can I ask how much time I got left?
You have 4 minutes.
Halfway. What else? So, one thing I guess I'll also say is that I guess I'll remark on some of the proposed arguments for the Christian God. You see, you had mentioned someone was like a presuppositionalist apologetic. So I'm not sure which version they'll run, but they'll run something of the form, some necessary fact obtains. If there is no Christian God, this necessary fact would not obtain, therefore God exists. Most of the time, there's like no justification for premise one, like the inference or the implication. Sometimes, depending on what they mean, it would be the case that you reject premise two of it, but regardless, transcendental arguments are analytic, so they deny the revelatory nature of God, and I take it that Christianity is a revelatory religion and cannot be derived analytically. As far as I'm aware, the main branches that I've read on all affirm the revelatory nature of God and the prerequisite of Scripture for the religion. And so the counter argument would be, if the transcendental argument for Christianity is sound, Christian theology is true. If Christian theology is true, then the transcendental argument for Christian theology is unsound. So either the argument's unsound or it's true, and Christian theology is true. And if Christianity is true, then it's unsound. So it's unsound or it's unsound. So it's unsound by excluded middle. There are some response, like maybe they'll do like fine tuning. I guess probably the response is either to say that, probably the response I'll say is that we're not really aware of the necessary conditions for life to obtain. Like, oh, if the values are different, maybe there's no life. Okay. Or maybe we could say something like, we would be pessimistic, but it's unclear whether or not for sure that would be the case. And also if there could be other rules that we're unaware of where life permitting conditions are more probable. And also, I don't think any bare design hypothesis prefers the fact that life obtains over its negation. So you're going to have to put a lot of theology into that.
30 seconds.
And I'll end it there.
Perfect. Thank you, Howdy. And then we have Curt as well on the atheist side. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your 8 minutes.
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
All right. It's on.
Okay, so as Howdy mentioned early, but I also want to bring up, even within the scriptures, there isn't a stable God concept. So you have everything from the logos-like redeemer to a moral exemplar to an eschatological prophet. And the book of Revelation represents a very Hebrew prophetic Lamb of God. And these are never unified in the text or made clear. But the history after the New Testament is even more diverse. So you have Marcionites as possibly the very first Christians. And later you get Arian versus Nicenes. You get monophysites versus diophysites. You have Unitarians that show up again later in Christianity. You have splinter groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses who become Arian again. You have Mormons who don't even have a traditional idea of God. Yet all of these groups claim to be Christian, and one will count the other as heretical, and the other will count itself as orthodox. And so there's really not a way to analyze a single Christian God. You can only analyze the family of Christian gods. And this is where I think linguistically analyzing the words is really helpful. So Christian God is really just an adjective that is poorly determined, being used to describe the noun form of the word divine that has maximal play in human minds. And so that even if a person says they identify with a Christian God, that distinction from person to person is massive. So then what are the specific issues with the Christian God family, since we've identified that there's not one single one? And the first problem, of course, is the Trinitarian problem that Howdy alluded to. You have one being, and yet there are three persons. All of us understand as single persons how we make choices, but how would a single being that has three persons make choices? And is it possible that their wills are at times unaligned? If you have distinct wills, then you have a majority 2 out of 3, but you have 3 distinct wills, which means 3 gods. If there's only one will, then there can't really be 3 persons, because there are no separate impulses within the Trinity. And this collapses into a contradiction. And of course, that's just the critique made by Unitarians who are within the Christian tradition. That's not even an atheist critique. But a deeper critique of the Trinity that comes from modern science is the understanding of the incarnation as a holobiont. Human beings, as we understand them now, are not a single organism made of human cells and human DNA. They're an organism community made of the host and its multicellular and single cellular commensal organisms. Without these other organisms, many necessary body processes simply don't work. So the person who imagines an incarnation of any kind of deity is stuck trying to figure out where the deity ends and the other organisms that are part of the unity of that being begin, because we now know that there's huge amounts of communication between the brain tissue and these other organisms, and that areas that we thought were sterile do have microbiota in them that interact with and alter behavior. The Trinity itself claims unity in diversity, but that's unity between the divine and the human substance. Once we add in a third substance, the non-human substances, there can't be a mechanism of shared substance, and there's not really any interdependence here, only a contradiction. If Jesus's, eye follicle mites were also divine, that means that God shared in insect life as well as human life. And for most Christians, that is not something they want to accept. Another problem is the problem of divine substance. Divine substance is really a category mistake for modern scientific people. It's borrowed from Greek metaphysics, and it's very clear from the earliest phraseology in Plato's works that the soul and the idea of divinity were for Plato a divine substance that was rarefied but made of material. The Greek concept of ichor, which is the blood of the gods, guarantees that they thought that the gods had physical substance. But in the modern world, we now know there is no such thing. And so we get a nonsense phrase from Christians like immaterial substance. An immaterial substance is a philosophically incoherent concept and is not more sensible than a square circle in a two-dimensional plane. The Gospels themselves don't give a coherent God concept. The first Gospel that we have is the Gospel of Mark, and it's the uniform belief by all scholars that the Gospel of Mark is the origin of the Jesus story as we know it. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is ignorant in Mark 13:32, limited in Mark 6:5, and he has despair on the cross in Mark 15:34. The later Gospels recognize this problem and alter the story to inflate Jesus's divinity. But it is highly likely that Mark does not see himself as writing a history of a specific individual, but is writing an allegory about the role of the divine logos and its transport through the 3 stages of Pauline soteriology. In Paul, we see that there's a fleshly man, the sarkic man, there is a psychic man, the man of philosophy, and a pneumatic man. And the pneumatic man is the man of spirit.
Hang on one second. Modern men lost again. You keep having background noise slamming in the back. Oh, he left. Okay. You can continue. Sorry.
So And we see that what's happening is that Mark is writing a description in allegory of this Pauline understanding of salvation, and Mark is also taking Paul's side. Theodore Whedon, in his book, Mark, Traditions in Conflict, clearly identifies the author of the Gospel of Mark as anti-apostolic and anti-Petrine, and he is trying to, with the concepts of the Messianic secret and the description of the disciple Peter as Satan, minimize the authority of the Jerusalem pillars as described in Galatians. So there's constant conflict within the New Testament itself about what the nature of the Christian God is and what he wants. The book of Revelation describes a synagogue of Satan that they describe as having taken over much of the Christian world. We today simply do not know that the book of Revelation isn't describing what are now referred to as the proto-Orthodox Christians and who have become the winners in the early Christian battle. So we see a collapse of the concept of the Trinity itself is contradictory. The concept of divine substance is incoherent. And within the Gospels, the texts for the Christian doctrine, there is no stable conception of God.
And that is time. Okay. I gave you a couple extra seconds because I had to talk to Modern Men Lost again there. Is he going to be rejoining, or do you know what's going on with him? Okay. I'll let you do your intro, Jack, and I'm going to try to find you. I have a couple other people that I reached out to earlier, so I'm going to let you do your introduction, and I'll add a couple minutes at the end of all this for what I'm interrupting with. But Jack, you've got 8 minutes. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your timer.
I think I'm good. Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you to all, for the host and for the opening statements already. There's so many points were brought up. First of all, the question, does the Christian God exist? As was pointed out, we need to kind of narrow these down. What does that mean, the Christian God? For me, what I will be addressing is the God that Jesus spoke of, the Father from the heavens. And for me, that Christian God is following Jesus. A lot of Christian interpretations have made the man the God and missed out on the Father, the unseen. And this is where our conversation really is, What is the source of all of this happening? That life that we know of, from the history we've learned of to each day that we discover. What's behind all that? And some of the things I heard, you guys are... I didn't actually understand all of the words used. I'm still growing in my vocabulary regarding philosophy and some of the ideas on debate and thought. But in my own words, the idea that the Christian God is revelatory by nature, I think that is accurate. This God that I've learned of is beyond logic. It's beyond the limits of our logic, because logic is limited by the variables And there's so many infinite number of variables involved in bringing, what was the term you used? I can't read my writing. Curt used a wonderful word about the organism being a community. That right there, the example of the human being a complex community of life, bacteria and cells and all of this. To me, that's another example of the Trinity. In a broadened concept, it's the multiplicity as one, or it's the one as many. And so I'm confident that the words in the Bible, while there were lying pens of the scribes, throughout time, throughout history, the wisdom that's found in there. Sorry, I got noise. The wisdom that's found in there from the words attributed to Jesus, those words of love and forgiveness and that example of sacrifice and leadership, should more men and women, should the Christian community actually live that way, we would not have wars, we would not have oppression. The evil and darkness would be overcome. So some of the other points, it was said that there's lacking a stable, if I caught this right, and I agree, many people alive today, they profess these beliefs, and yet when you ask simple questions, their answer is, go read this big book. They can't really explain a stable God concept. It's been poorly defined. In many ways it has, because in many ways our words can't do justice for that which is beyond space and time. But what we can identify through our own lens, through our own subjective perception, we can identify that which is divine, that which is holy, that which is pure, that which is saintly. We can identify those. And then the point that many of the ideas they're philosophically incoherent. And what I truly trust is the God that I know, the God that Jesus spoke of, which is the Christian God, the true Christian God, not the false God of the churches, but the true God. It can't be intellectualized. It must be realized. And I think that is the truth. And I think that's supported by the scripture. It's the revelatory nature of God. We realize who we are. We realize what is happening. The truth exists whether we've discovered it, whether we know it, whether we ignore it, whether anything. The truth exists just as God exists. Whether we discover it, whether we seek it, whether we deny it, we have the free will. And we've been given the options of choice. I hope I'm not rambling, bouncing around too much. I hope it comes through a little bit.
No, yeah, and you've got 2 minutes left on the intro, so.
2 minutes left. Okay. Well, following the concept of this Father that Jesus spoke of, that he was, as he said, he embodied. He and the Father are one, meaning as he moved is what the Father's will was for him to do. And what he said and what he showed is love. And so many of the churches have overcomplicated God with all the scriptures and the rules and all of the dogma and traditions. But truly what Jesus was trying to teach is a personal relationship with the giver of truth and having a loving relationship with all of life. And you can, if you love you, that's all you got to do. Just love you like God loves you, and then you can love everybody else like God wants us to do. So the path, my conclusion, my simple conclusion on the Christian God, that God is the truth. To know God, seek the truth. And you'll find the truth, and it will lead you to God. But you must have a love for the truth. You must love the truth more than your ego, more than your beliefs. You must be willing to be wrong. I was. I didn't want to be wrong, but I was proven wrong many times. I'm convinced God is. And we're lucky. We're lucky to know. That's what I feel. We're blessed to be aware of life. We could live and never have any memories of it. I think some people do.
That is time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction or the initial statements. And then, Da Freak, you have 8 minutes on does a Christian God exist? Let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your timer.
Go ahead and start. Okay,
Good
I'm
to
just
go.
going to wing this on the fly. Just, coming up on a whim, but, we have many reasons to believe in God and the Christian God. First of all, we have the actual scripture, which is accurate in its, in its history and geography, and probably a lot of the genealogy and a lot of the characters and a lot of the different things that pertain to history in terms of like Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, and Egypt, and Pharaoh, and the Assyrians, and how all these cultures kind of cross-reference each other in their own writings or their own record keeping with their seals that the kings of these nations, or these, I guess you call them nations, had when they would send correspondence. They would, make a hot wax seal, and they would stamp it with their seal. We have thousands, well, I don't know if thousands, we have hundreds and hundreds of those seals from those different uh, civilizations all throughout the time of Israel and those other nations, and they cross-reference each other in Sanskrit and the Hebrew and whatever the Babylonians were speaking. Probably, I'm not sure what it was, but Egyptian and their hieroglyphics, or the whatever they had, or both. They do reference those other nations, so we know that those are all true. They existed. They were there. There was a record. There's cross-reference. There's everything that is required for valid evidence. Okay, so we have the archaeology. That's the archaeology. We have the geography. Egypt is still Egypt. The Red Sea is still the Red Sea. Mount Sinai is still Mount Sinai. Syria is Syria. Asia Minor is Turkey. Now we know that. Persia was Iran, and Babylonian was Iraq. So like all these things are still pretty much intact today, and these ancient civilizations, are derived and gave birth to what we have today over there in the Middle East. Ethiopia is still Ethiopia, mentioned in the Bible. Sudan, Libya, all these nations, So now you have the geography, you have the archaeology, we have the physical evidence of Mount Sinai, where God came down in a portion of His glory and rested on the mountain, where we see the burnt top of the mountain, and that's physical evidence. That's recorded in the Bible. Exodus something. I wish I could do that off the top of my head, but so that occurred, when the Israelis were leaving Egypt, and they crossed the Red Sea, and they settled in a camp or whatever, where that occurred. So a lot of these things are traced. They're archaeologically accurate, and so the case there is pretty solid. We have the pillar that is actually on the Saudi Arabia side of the Red Sea, that demarks where the Red Sea crossing took place. The Egyptian side is not there, but the one on the Saudi Arabian side actually is there, and that is also prophesied, and it is also referenced in the Bible. Isaiah, I don't know, it's like maybe I'm not sure exactly where it's at, but it's in there, and it's also something that is tended to by King Solomon. Okay, so then we have the Old Testament prophets, and their prophecies. A lot of them are coming true. A lot of them have come true. A lot of them are cyclical. A lot of them are one-timers. A lot of them are happening right now. A lot of them are going to happen. We can use prophecy to basically solidify that God is real, because there can only be so many things that are coincidence before you have to actually consider that those coincidences have to add up to at least something, if not at least a little bit of diligence and looking into. Because if you're just going to dismiss it all like outright because whatever, then you're just sealing your own fate, because there's no way that magic or tarot readings or sorcery or dreams or could come up with these kind of things and be accurate to the extent that God is. So we have history, we've got geography, we've got archaeology, we've got prophecy, we've got scripture, and we also have testimony, whether it be written testimony in the scripture or third party kind of written testimony, or even current testimony of people who are always claiming to have an experience. And it's kind of funny how it's always the same object that they're having the experience with. It's not just some schizophrenic delusion of the I don't know, the brick wall outside, or the the S mountain, as they call it
2
here,
minutes.
and where they have the football games at, or the stadium of it's always the same object. And finally, the biggest evidence for God is the Lord himself, Jesus Christ. He declared him in the temple, and he proved to him when he was resurrected. Thank you.
Thank you, Da Freak, for the wonderful intro. So I'm going to pause the timer real fast. So this leaves about an hour and 15 minutes left for the debate. So that's perfect. If we need to go a little bit longer and everybody's cool with it, we can add a little bit of time at the end. But with that being said, this is a mega bloodbath debate. So let's keep the low blows out of it, right? Let's try to be somewhat fair with each other's time. All of you are very nice people. I think this should be a very productive conversation. Da Freak and Jack are on the same side. Howdy and Curt are on the same side. So at least for the purposes of the debate, let's do our best not to be arguing with your own teammate. Yeah, I don't think that'll happen. Also, during this debate, there's going to be minimal rules. I'll try not to interrupt too much, but we do want to tie the topics back into, does a Christian God exist? So if you go on a tangent, make sure it's related to the topic, and you can tie it back into the topic. It should be pretty easy to do if you're staying on topic. Veering off course on the topic and not tying it back into the topic is a negative point for the audience at the end, and they'll know to hold that against you when they go do the vote. So if that happens, just keep in mind that's a negative 1 imaginary point. And then there's a couple other things. Declaring yourself the winner is a negative 1 imaginary point. Things like that, right? Let's try to have a good conversation here. That's pretty much it. Super chats will interrupt the discussion in a reasonable time frame and shift that. This is how the audience can control the discussion. The super chats will shift to a question, and then the panelists will be able to engage from there. Anybody have any questions? Are you guys ready to rock and roll here? Mega bloodbath engaged! You have about an hour and 15 minutes.
How's it going, everybody?
Hey, I'd like to thank you guys both for really, really interesting openings. And I think we have a lot of agreement, right? So Freak, Jack, Howdy, and I think all agree that Christianity is revelatory and that we can decide about the quality of the Christian God based on revelation primarily. Is that true?
I think that's fair. Yeah. Yes.
I need to think about that, because there's a lot of the evidence for God is cumulative, and so there's not just one thing that's gonna bring someone to God. For me, it was a combination of a bunch of different things. So just saying it's revelatory,
Well,
I
Freak,
don't know if I can agree with that outright.
Okay, so you certainly mentioned revelation in Scripture as a primary component of your faith. So would you say
Yeah.
it's at least an important component?
Definitely, yeah, it's definitely a important component. Just like learning anything is, it kind of reveals itself to you when you are reading a book about anything. It clicks, or you understand it, and that's kind of a revelation, right?
Sure, right. So then here's the key question then. There are many people in many faith traditions who experience revelatory experiences that may or may not correspond with the revelatory experience of another individual in a different faith tradition. So if revelation is a primary way to find out the truth, how does a modern evangelical Christian decide between their particular revelatory insights and that of a Mormon who has a burning in their bosom about the truth of Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon?
Well, real quick, I'll just say that what you're kind of proposing. The opposite would be something like our buddy Wesley and his vision that he has, and his assumption that everyone in the world has also had that same vision. But we know that that's just not true because of our own experience. We have none of us have had the same exact vision that Wesley's had. So the fact that God can make us individuals with our own individual fingerprints means that He's going to reveal Himself in our own individual way, in His own individual way with us.
Yeah. So who's Wesley? I don't know what you're talking about.
Wes Curry.
No.
You don't. The older gentleman with the white hair, he's from Chicago. Used to, kind of be running around on the streets. Found Jesus, had a vision.
Yeah, I'm still completely lost.
All right.
What is his vision?
The vision looks like a painting from Egypt or something in the Nile Valley with like a bunch of crops and the moon, and it's I don't know what it is exactly, but I know I haven't had that dream
so
or that
you
vision.
do not find his revelatory experience controlling for your experience. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
And Jack looks like he's nodding along, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what tools did you use to determine that?
Because his assertion is that everyone has had that vision.
Okay, he asserts that I've had that vision?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds like that's wrong for me for sure, right?
Right.
Yeah. So we can be confident that someone who asserts something that they say applies to us, but we can know ourselves we don't have that experience. We can rule that out. So I think all of us would agree that's ruled out, right?
Yeah, definitely. Except, we can't categorically rule out, revelation like that. But
Right. But what I'm saying is, like, there's people who really get a burning in the bosom about the truth of the Book of Mormon and the truth of Joseph Smith's Doctrine and Covenants.
mm-hmm.
And so what I want to know is, those people accept the Christian scriptures in some form, but they have a very different interpretation. And yet they don't say everybody gets that burning in the bosom, just they do. So how do you adjudicate those claims between the two traditions?
I have to think about that for a minute. Jack, if you have something. It's a good question, though.
These are great questions. What came to my mind is trying to explain an experience, trying to explain a flavor. Our explanations internally and externally are going to be based upon our level of not knowing, right?
Real fast, Da Freak, you have like a fan buzzing in the background. If you're not talking, could you please mute your mic just for the sake of the audience, please? And thank you.
Yes, boss.
Sorry, I forgot what I was saying.
I do apologize for interrupting.
We were on how do you adjudicate between faith, tradition, revelatory claims.
Thank you. And what I was pointing out is the level of vocabulary, the level of words, the level that's going to determine our ability to explain. And a lot of things happen in life. Some of them just cannot be explained. And when there's enough synchronicities, enough coincidences, similarities and patterns, you kind of, it adds up. And so I think the answer to that question is each of us, our discernment. We each have to discern what is true and what is not in a world
And
of
do
lies.
you use your sense experience and reason to make that determination?
I would say greatly, because
Okay.
to me, that's what the Holy Spirit is. In that Trinity, that's our inner knowing, what we would identify as our intuition, our inspiration, or our gut, those things.
Can I ask a couple of questions? So did you take notes on my opening, or do you remember much about what I said in my opening?
You had a number of conclusions, and I didn't catch all of them. I got hung up on a couple of the logic trains, but please
But
go
you
ahead.
didn't write any notes. I didn't know if Da Freak, were you here, and did you hear my opening, and did you have any notes written down, or do you remember any of what I said?
I heard it and I didn't take notes because I was trying to get up here. But uh, if I thought about it, I could remember a few things. But you were around a few different things. So
That's
if there's anything you want to touch on in
no, that's totally
particular,
fine. Before I get into my
Howdy, I took notes on your
yeah,
opening if you want.
Thank you.
no, I'm not going to interrogate
Okay.
you, and I'm not really going to interrogate you guys either. But I did take notes on both of your openings. So I'll start with Jack.
Wait. Since you took notes, can we touch on the audience super chat real fast, and then you can go into your notes? Is that fair?
Whatever you want to do.
Cool. I'll be quick. Shmi Muanger says, God sends himself to our dimension, Jesus, like we sent a robot gorilla to a gorilla habitat. Thank you so much for the super chat. That's greatly appreciated. Sorry for interrupting.
So I'll start with Jack since your opening was first on my notes. So at the start, I couldn't tell. Would you say that you're a Unitarian or a Trinitarian, or are you undecided? Or are you not comfortable with labels like that?
I don't know that I have a clear enough identification of the various. I don't know that I could identify myself with any of those, to be honest.
Okay, you had mentioned the lying pens of the scribe. Do you take it
Yep.
that maybe the translations that we have, or the manuscripts in the original languages that we have, and even the original manuscripts that those were copied from, do you think that transmission of revelation was errant, and that there are possibly, if not plausibly, mistakes in the corpus of scripture we have access to today?
The revelatory nature, that's a great question, and I don't know if I'm making excuses for it or not, but I know that the texts and the intent have been corrupted. From what I've been hearing, there's been more archaeological finds, more discoveries of ancient texts that show maybe some differences. Like recently, I heard of a discovery on another version of the Moses scroll, one that may not have, all of the animal sacrifice stuff. And if there is that, if there was a law offered to man, just basically the 10 Commandments, and without the animal sacrifice, that makes a lot more sense to me. So,
Okay, and
yeah.
yeah, it's short is better for me. And you said that he is beyond logic. By that, do you mean that God, his actions, or his attributes are not bound or adhere to the classical laws of logic?
Well, here, I'll give you the conclusion I've come to, because it defies logic. I believe that God is, and we only believe that we are.
Okay. Do you think that God can do anything contradictory if he wanted to?
Of course, from our perspective, much of it appears contradictory.
Okay. You had also mentioned that he is beyond words. By this, do you mean that God himself is either inexplicable or unintelligible, or what exactly did you mean by that?
It means we have a better chance of identifying what God is not than trying to define, because definitions create limits, and I can't imagine any limits on this God. I in my head and heart.
Okay, the next thing that we can identify divine predicates such as divine or holiness or saintliness. When you say identification, are you talking about your perception of like your senses, like you see something or you hear something or you smell or taste something that you would predicate it as being divine?
Again, I suppose it depends on the definition of divine, but it wouldn't just be an inner experience. We can witness and observe divine as well.
Could you give me an example of something that you've witnessed or observed that you would classify as divine?
Beauty, the gorgeous sunset, the magnificent waterfalls, the babbling brook, any of that. To me, that is all divine.
By divine, do you mean that they are essentially divine or divine in their nature? Okay, thank you. You'd mentioned free will. I don't know if you mentioned this in passing or if you're saying that if free will exists, that God exists, maybe.
I ran with the conclusion that free will is that I suggested that we have the choice to ignore truth or seek the truth.
You had said that you are convinced and that you believe, but you would accept that people have personal testimonies of their own that would conflict with your revelation.
I don't know that other testimonies would conflict with my revelation, because part of my revealing was external revelations, learning of testimonies, firsthand experiences of others, along with what I had learned and experienced for myself.
Okay, and has God ever given you any personal subjective experiences that are unshareable with us that maybe you can't really explain or put into words directly? Like, has he spoken to, like, or anything like, so you're not like, okay.
I've never had any supernatural voices or powerful phenomenon, but I have experienced periods of just ecstasy and bliss during prayer, meditation, doing nothing.
And you attribute your ecstatic experiences as directly from God?
It's a
Okay, and would you agree that there are hundreds of thousands of children who pray to God and die of starvation and cruel and unimaginable suffering?
yes, it happens.
Okay. That was it for Jack. I only have two things to say about Freak. It seems like Freak was making like a general historical case. He said that scripture has historical or geographical facts that support its reliability. So, would you agree that like I could make a book today including thousands or tens of thousands of accurate historical facts that would lend to its credence, but not necessarily entail that everything in it was inerrant? Like I could say, list off a bunch of trivial facts about what's going on today, and then at the end say, "Oh, by the way, God is a green apple." That would make it necessarily the case that God is a green apple, correct?
Yeah, like you have the Odyssey, an ancient text that's maybe part fiction, maybe part truth, maybe both, that you can reference. But then you can also reference something that's total fantasy or fiction, excuse me, fiction, which would be like the Harry Potter stuff or the Lords of the uh, Rings stuff. So I just don't think that, based on the fact that all these geographical locations are still intact, that they're still there, that they're referenced correctly, uh, would would cause anyone to think that the Bible is a made up fiction like a Harry Potter.
So you had referenced the Iliad. So you agree that like the Homeric epics, even like Gilgamesh, Hellenistic period writings about pantheistic gods, could include historical information, but also would include facts, or would also include propositions that you find to be false, such as the existence of Zeus, or maybe have some other things that you wouldn't take to be inerrant. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, are you aware that it generally was the case that in ancient writings they didn't distinguish between fictional and non-fictional? They had sort of a blend in their writings of both genres.
I mean, maybe for the Greeks.
Okay, you had mentioned, I don't know if you had mentioned, I was trying hard to parse what exactly you were saying. You said maybe there's like lots of manuscripts that are sort of cross-referencing that we have. So would you agree that we do not have the original manuscripts for the New Testament writings?
Um, the originals, I think that would be accurate. Yes.
And you would agree that we don't have the copies or the copies of those copies either, and that at least not completely, like we have maybe fragments of the copies, but nothing, like no complete works of the earliest copies. Is that
I
correct?
don't think I could agree with that. No. I think there are copies that are intact and they're probably housed in the Catholic, vault or something. But they've been compiled. They're rare. I mean, they're super rare. But I think there's like a copy of the original, and there may be like one of each or something like that. So I couldn't agree, just outright with that statement.
So you would disagree with the statement that the earliest complete codices and unseals are dated to the earliest in around the 400 AD with the Sinaiticus, the Alexandrinus, and the Leningradus unseals.
No, I couldn't agree with that either because the Council of Nicaea was before then, and they were able to compile uh, just from the regular folk in the township or whatever, that some people had a copy or whatever, and they were able to round up just a few of them, and they used those during
Do you
that time.
do you think that we have that material that they had today?
It's possible. I mean, it might be fragmented out at this point, but unfortunately, unlike other things like the original, sealed, scrolled up Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John type. Those definitely don't exist as far as I know.
Do,
These are copies that were harvested from the citizenry, basically.
do you have a complete codex of the New Testament that you could date earlier than 400 AD?
I don't, but I'm pretty sure that there's at least a copy of. I think it's Mark, that exists in the Catholic vault or whatever.
Do you know what the name of that manuscript would be? Or it's
It's been a long time,
they'll say
so
like P70. Okay, that's fine.
yeah, it's been a
And
while.
and the last thing that you had mentioned was experiences. I don't know if you're referring to near-death experiences. Would you agree that near-death experiences are conflicting and non-replicable?
Non-replicable. Yeah, I would agree with that for the most part. And what was the other thing you described it as?
Conflicting. So someone will say that they met the Hindu god and he had like a monkey face and the nose of an elephant, and someone will say they met the gator god, and someone will say they met the Trinity god, and someone will say they met Zeus. Would you agree that these are conflicting accounts from near-death experiences?
Yeah, but I don't think that those people that are seeing those things are seeing the God.
Okay.
So they may perceive it as that, but it's not. They're having a. They're not perceiving what they saw correctly.
And do you think that there are any alternative explanations available for these experiences, such as hallucinations or mental altering substances, or lack of oxygen, or dreams, or anything else that could possibly account for these experiences?
The ones that are like medically, that are actually medically, no activity, brain activity, medically, pronounced dead, whatever. There's no alternative, unfortunately, because there's just no way that a chemical can induce a whole experience and actually retain it and be able to recall it once they come back. It's not possible.
And the last thing was you said was Jesus asserted that God exists, and Jesus was resurrected, therefore God exists. So do you think this is kind of silly, but do you think it's possible that Jesus Christ could have existed and could have said that and could have resurrected and God not existing? Like it could have been maybe an implausible explanation, like he's from the future, or he's an alien, or has some scientific equipment, or I don't know, you could say like the resurrection was misunderstood, or he was a body double, or any of these weird theories or scenarios that could account for both of those three datum points.
Probably not, because the Jesus that we know actually loves mankind, and that Jesus would probably be like worship me, kind of like a dictator alien, bow down kind of a entity, because that's usually where the ego goes.
Okay, that's all the notes I had on both of you guys. I thank you for clarifying your opening statements, and I guess I'll let you guys ask us questions, or maybe Curt wants to talk to you guys a bit. Hopefully we can get into my arguments later, but if you guys had questions, or Curt, I was going to step back for now and let you guys talk.
I did have one more question, since I think we still all agree that at least revelation is an important component. Is that right? So in the Gospel of Mark, in chapter 17, Mark, it's Matthew 17. Mark has it in chapter 11, and it's in verse 23. Mark says that if Christians tell a mountain to be taken up and thrown into the sea, that it will come to pass. So as far as I know, no Christian has ever done that. And that's clearly like all the Gospels include that pericope. So, and that seems like such an easy piece of evidence to like decide if someone's actually got the strength of Yahweh or Jesus's father, which I'm not sure if we didn't really stress that position, Jack, but like, what is Jesus saying there in the Gospel of Mark? Is he making a hyperbolic statement that he means to be taken as a metaphor? Or does he really think that and just no Christian's ever gotten that power?
I think it has to be taken metaphorically and spiritually. A lot of the things that Jesus talks about are spiritual in nature, and just like you have the whole armor of God, type of spiritual warfare type of
I think
stuff.
that's Paul.
That's what?
I think Paul is the one with the armor,
Yeah.
not Jesus.
But it's referring to like a spiritual, the spiritual realm and the spiritual battles and the spiritual reality that doesn't pertain to an actual, dirt hill mountain being moved into the sea and displaced.
Sure. So this brings up another method, right? So if Jesus says that I'll be a cornerstone and I'll build up the temple in 3 days, and he says you'll be able to throw a mountain and it'll go into the sea, but those are all metaphors, right? Like Jesus wasn't really a rock and mountains didn't really fall into the sea. How are we so certain that his claim that he's going to rise from the dead isn't also metaphorical. And in fact, in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus's dead body never shows up in the earliest manuscripts. The women run away, they never tell anyone, and there's only a youth in the tomb. And in Pauline soteriology, which Mark is clearly following, Paul says flesh and blood can't inherit the kingdom of heaven. And so in Pauline understanding, there wouldn't be a flesh and blood body for anyone to see, and Mark doesn't show us one. So how do we know that Jesus wasn't talking metaphorically there as well?
Well, like I said, it's a spiritual kind of lesson, a spiritual talking about faith and whatnot at that time, any spiritual reality. His resurrection is a spiritual reality, right? I mean, it's actually.
So you agree that he didn't resurrect into flesh and blood in Mark. He only resurrects spiritually.
No, I don't agree with that. He since he is glorified and is God, then he can do whatever he wants, however he wants, whenever he wants, and he doesn't care, like what we think about it. Really, I mean, he does, but the thing is, the spirit is what is resurrected, and the body just kind of came along with it. Right? Because how can a physical body walk through a wall and eat fish? Right?
Okay, but that's not in Mark. See, so that's all people trying to correct Mark. We really have to, if we're going to use the principle of historians, which is go to the earliest source possible, and the more difficult the reading is, the more likely it is to be correct. Right? The harder it is, that's called lectio. No, it's called lectio difficilor, lectio potior. Right? So the more difficult reading is more likely to be original and correct. So the difficult reading is there's no physical body, right? Christians don't typically like that reading, and the other gospels all try to fix that. So if we take Mark as the primary text and we see him as following Paul, who says flesh and blood can't inherit the kingdom of heaven, and we already show that he's used metaphorical language and hyperbolic language, how do we know there was a physical body resurrected when he doesn't give us many things that the other gospels do, and the other gospels really don't like his gospel and really try to fix it?
Well, I wish that I had more understanding of the end of Mark that you're referring to without having to look it up right now, but since I don't and I can't reference anything to the other ones,
okay, well then we'll just leave that.
Acceptable to you.
Jack, do you have an explanation?
You asked some great questions. My understanding of that, Mark 11:23, regarding faith. And faith is a mystery. God's power is a mystery. I mean, I can believe in what Jesus said, but for what will would the Father move a mountain? I don't know. But the whole point of that part is to truly express that there is power in our faith. Jesus talks about that over and over with the healing and with all sorts of things. So what is it actually intended to mean? I think it's like a subtle message telling us, think big and have faith.
Okay, and then I did have one other question. So again, we've all agreed that this is all revelatory, right? And do we all agree that the Hebrew scriptures are the basis for the New Testament?
To my knowledge,
I agree.
So. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, they were all Jewish too, by the way.
Yeah, correct. So and Da Freak, you did bring up that the prophecy is a very important component, and that you view the prophecies in the Hebrew scriptures as important to understanding, right? So the Hebrew scriptures do name one historical person as the Messiah that we are pretty sure did live in history and is a real person, right? So who is that?
Hold on, I gotta think now. I think in the Talmud there was.
No, it's not the Talmud. The Talmud is not a Hebrew scripture that I'm talking about. I'm talking about in the text of the Hebrew scriptures that we put in the Bible.
It's either Ezra or Herabel or something. Or I'm sorry, hold on. Zerubbabel, is that the name?
No, it's not Zerubbabel. It's Cyrus the Great.
Oh, okay.
So Cyrus the Great was called the Messiah in the Hebrew Bible in Isaiah 45:1, right?
All
Are
right,
you
I'll take a
familiar
look.
with that?
I mean, I I wasn't raised in church or anything, so like I know scripture and I know my way around it, but I don't have it like memory first. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. I don't expect you to. But wouldn't you say that if the Hebrew scriptures get all that way down and then they eventually say, and oh, by the way, we've been pointing towards a Messiah and here's his name and this is who he is, we can stop looking?
Yeah, but what other prophecy did he fulfill? If you're talking about Cyrus, I mean, he commissioned the temple being built, right? But
Yeah,
after
and
that,
he brought the Israelites out of the bondage that they were in by the Babylonians.
right? But after that,
And he was a king, like he was a king on earth.
that's true. I don't see where it says
He
they
was a
call-
king
calling
of
him
kings.
Messiah.
The word in Hebrew is lemashio, which is anointed, right? So that means
Okay.
the Messiah.
Okay, but we also have the same thing said about Nebuchadnezzar, my servant Nebuchadnezzar, who was killing, and who actually
Now,
brought about.
Nebuchadnezzar is not called the Messiah.
Well, but he's called an anointed or a servant, and he's the one that took the Israelis, captive and deported them to Babylon. So God
Right.
uses
Yeah.
whoever he needs, whoever he wants to get things done. That shouldn't be a big like. Okay, yeah, Cyrus fulfilled some prophecy. That doesn't mean he's the Messiah. That doesn't mean he had. It doesn't
No,
mean he was
I'm not.
sinless and was able to take away the sin of your sin and my sin.
Okay, but the Bible doesn't say anything about like the Messiah taking away sin in the Hebrew scriptures. That's all a Christian interpretation.
I don't think so. I have to find it, but I'm pretty sure that it alludes to it.
Okay, so do you think that the Jewish people in Judea in the first century were the experts on what they thought about the Messiah and the Hebrew scriptures, or is someone else an expert on what they thought?
Yeah, they're not the expert because they misinterpret things wrong. Sorry.
So they didn't know what they thought about the Hebrew scriptures in the first century. Someone else knows what they thought better than they did.
Well, they got it wrong, didn't they?
Well, that's a personal opinion you may have, but they were there. They had the Hebrew scriptures, and they were in Jerusalem at the time, right?
Right, but the Messiah died, and he didn't usher in their kingdom, right?
Well, you know why they didn't think that he was the Messiah is because their book already told them who the Messiah was, which was Cyrus.
Okay, so then why wasn't their kingdom ushered in, and why aren't they ruling the world?
Because there's no God,
Okay, so
Wait.
right?
basically
So
it
there's
proves
no God,
that
right?
it proves that they weren't the expert.
People,
It proves that they still weren't
No.
the expert.
Da Freak, people tell stories
Were wrong.
and they get stuff wrong all the time.
Right.
And so the fact that someone told a story or said something would happen and it didn't happen is just Wesley, right? That's just a normal day. That's what you brought up earlier.
Yeah,
People
but you're
get
saying
shit
that
wrong
the
badly.
first century Jews are more expert than say us because they were there, but obviously they got it wrong. So how could they be the expert?
Well, no, you're saying obviously they got it wrong. What I'm saying is, how do you know that?
Well, because then what they said about the Messiah, or what they still say about the Messiah, hasn't happened. Right? It hasn't ushered in. They're not ruling the earth, and their Messiah died.
No. What if they just think their Messiah was going to take them out of captivity from Babylon and send them back to Israel, which Cyrus definitely did?
Okay, but they would still.
So they weren't looking for a new Messiah at that point because they already had one in Isaiah. And when a guy came along and said he was that, they like didn't listen to him and didn't pay attention. And then he said that they could like talk and move mountains into the sea, and nobody got that ability. So like, this guy didn't know what he was talking about. I'm going to ignore him.
Wow.
Okay. That's going to be a more of a religion.
Just like you dismiss Wesley, right?
Well, I disagree that I had the same vision he had.
Here,
Yeah, so you dismiss him because it doesn't make any sense. And Hebrews at the time would have heard this guy says that Christians can tell mountains to fall into the sea, and they obviously can't. So I'm just going to dismiss it. It's an easy check digit, right?
Not really, because I wouldn't dismiss everything Wesley says. Just when he says that I saw the vision that he had, that's not true. So I don't agree with that. But he says other things that are, possibly, accurate. So I don't just dismiss somebody outright. That's just not what I do. But the fact that Jesus was talking about having faith and being able to move a mountain with your faith and being, be able to overcome like things or whatever with faith doesn't mean that a Hebrew who is looking for their Messiah to, rescue them or whatever from Rome, and to usher in their kingdom, and they're going to rule over everyone, and everyone's going to bow their feet or, bow their knee and kiss their feet. That didn't happen.
Okay, so that's fine. Let's move on to one other thing, because you're really clear that you think the Exodus really took place. Is that right? Because you made a big point about that.
Oh yeah, I believe the Bible. Sure, yes.
Okay, so and then do you believe that people can throw sticks on the ground and they turn into crocodiles?
I think that God could do anything, actually.
Right. So do you believe it actually took place? Like, do you believe that Moses and Aaron threw their staffs on the ground and they turned into crocodiles?
Yeah, I think, why not?
Okay, that's fine.
Possible, why not? I mean,
point taken. So then you think also that God magicked away all the human stool and all the fireplaces and all the broken potteries and all the corpses that would have been found in the Sinai from the Exodus, right?
You're talking about the Israeli corpses or the Egyptian corpses?
The people who were like, supposedly there's hundreds of thousands of people. I'm just going to say, let's say there's 20 to 40,000 people. Some of them would have died, right? And they would have had to been buried in the stratum of that time frame, right? And when the Israeli archaeologists went in over the late 20th century to the Sinai to try to find the archaeological evidence for the Exodus, which they totally expected to find, they didn't find anything.
Well, I don't know how you can find anything in a sea where there's actually sharks and there's
No, I'm not talking about the sea. I'm talking about the desert of the Sinai, which they supposedly wandered in for 40 years. They would have made campfires. They would have had pottery. They would have had animals who would have had bones. They would have had people who died, who they would have buried over a 40-year time frame. So your assessment that the Exodus is historical either is that God let all that happen and then magicked away all the evidence, or that the way that it's described in the Bible is not real.
I mean, like thousands of years of erosion and storms and dirt, and dust.
Yeah, we can dig things up from the past and they stay in place in the past. Like, I mean, we can dig up things from 1,000 years ago in the United States, and if it's in the correct stratum, it's as it was 1,000 years ago.
Even if you were looking for a World War II style mass grave and whatever, that's still like a needle in the haystack when you're talking about thousands of miles of desert. And they were running around in circles, by the way.
Yeah, that the Israeli archaeologists had modern techniques, and they looked using those modern techniques, which are good enough to capture a group of 100 people who went through there 150 or 300 years ago.
So they found some people.
They found evidence of previous people who'd gone through the Sinai, but not at the correct times that could possibly have been the Exodus, and certainly not in the numbers that would have been the Exodus.
I think you're on a fishing expedition on this argument. It really.
No, it's not a fishing expedition. It's just the facts.
I've heard that as well. That
modern Jewish people accept that the Exodus is mythical.
No. I've heard that as well, and there's a lot of mystery in all of this, in the past, in the present, and the future. And I think that's the point. You mentioned, if I can swing us back, Curt, regarding
Sure.
the question of the early Jews, the early whatever, the people at that time and their perspective. And you made a conclusion that it points one way and they were wrong. Therefore, it points to the conclusion of the absence of God. And now, truly, if people are wrong in their faith and what they say, then yeah, it causes doubts. But what I observed is the mistake I made. I judged God because of people. And that's what, if we dismiss all of the information because something, doesn't add up completely, we're missing out.
Sure. So, I spent half my life as a fairly committed Christian and really, really took it quite seriously, as you may be able to guess from how I'm talking about it, right? But none of the stuff that I'm talking about here is the reason that I gave up Christianity. The reason I gave up Christianity had a lot more to do with the story it tells about the beginnings and the endings. So both of those issues were the big problems I had. So from my point of view, like there's just no role for the deity to get us to the point that we're at now. And there's no coherent concept of Christian understanding of what happens after we die. And those two things were what really led to all my doubts. But they certainly didn't get any smaller once I started actually critically analyzing the revelation and the scriptures themselves. So what I would like to say is like, there's a lot of different textual traditions and religions that I investigated myself. And so it's not Christianity that made me think there is no God. It's investigating all the other God concepts, like the Muslim God or the Zoroastrian God or the Buddhist God concepts or Odin or Zeus, that made me think there's no God, right?
Interesting. See, in my look, I saw similarities between the faiths, and it just confirmed my belief. But that's interesting. It is interesting how we find different things.
Yeah. So I think Howdy and I have asked a bunch of questions. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm sure Howdy is too.
Yeah, before I'm ready for questions, I just want to ask Da Freak, would you agree with Jack that God is mysterious and also unlike anything in creation?
Yes.
Okay.
I
And
mean, he's the creator.
did you have any questions about well, how should we do it? Like maybe I have questions about like what like do you think that there are problems with agnosticism or atheism, or were you
Well, I was going to ask Curt real quick. You researched all these other religions and everything, and do you assert or do you, agree that basically all those other gods are possible?
It depends on your definition of possible, but I would say in common parlance, I would say they are not possible.
Okay.
Like it is possible that there's a space alien spaceship behind Jupiter, but it's not possible, right? Like,
Okay. How about
there's metaphysical possibility and genuine possibility, and I would say genuinely, none of those gods are likely to exist.
Okay. I was gonna basically say you just said, but do you think that they're plausibly possible except for the Christian God, basically?
No, I do think. Look, I totally get where God concepts come from, and again, people have like very profound, deeply felt experiences if they have sleep paralysis or temporal lobe epilepsy, or they experience a deep loss or have head trauma, or for instance, in my case, I was in a severe car accident that made me fear for my life. All of those profound experiences give people a sense either of presence or of an actual physical sensation of a very real supernatural event. Like, there's no doubt that, especially prior to our era, the default would just be to accept that these people were telling the truth, because they would, for every discernible answer, be telling the truth, right? Like Luther himself apparently had sleep paralysis and interacted with the devil on multiple different occasions. And it's very hard, like, especially before there's an understanding of neurology, to get behind that kind of certainty, right? Fyodor Dostoevsky very likely had temporal lobe epilepsy after a head trauma. So did Ellen White. And so these experiences that these people have feel very, very real. And I'm sure other people see that they get value out of it and get a lot of respect. And so if they're charismatic, they're going to get a following, and people are going to find it, coherent to understand that over time. So the dichotomy that modern apologists often will say is that either these stories are true or they're like a fraud or a fiction. I think that's a terrible dichotomy, and I think it minimizes how important people's lived experience is to them. All I'm saying is, from my point of view today, I don't view those as compelling pieces of evidence today.
Have you ever seen Ellen White's headstone?
Yeah, I have seen it.
Pretty weird, isn't it?
I mean, I grew up in that tradition, and I have very mixed feelings about Ellen White, as you can guess.
I didn't know that. Do you think that we're ever going to be able to produce energy to where we're not just boiling water to produce electricity?
I don't know how that's on topic. But sure, I mean, probably we'll find a way to make better sources of energy than we have now. We certainly have up to now.
And so, a lot of this, it just seems like when people deny the Exodus and other parts of the Bible, like just kind of, I don't know if they're just challenging everything, or if they're just, basically trying to debunk the whole thing by, saying that that wasn't real or whatever. Where do you think a lot of this revisionist history comes from?
Well, again, there are parts of the Bible that modern historians believe do genuinely express actual historical events, right? So there was a King Josiah. And we have reason to think that the book of Deuteronomy was written right around the time of King Josiah, because it meets the political goals of his kingdom, and also it matches exactly the language of Hebrew at the time that he was king. And oh, by the way, the story of its discovery is that we were looking through the temple and we suddenly came across a really old book that seems to be written in exactly the type of words we write with right now.
But hold on a second. God favored Josiah and he liked him. He was one of the good ones. So why would God have Josiah commission a false history?
That's like telling me, Jack was possessed by the spirit of the Overlook. And so why would Jack have ever tried to hurt Danny? In The Shining, there's a mythical story being told. And I don't believe that The Shining's mythical story is true. And I also believe that in the Hebrew scriptures, there are, powerful people and not so powerful people who are telling stories about the past to prove a point and get people to do the things they want them to do. So King Josiah, if he's writing part of the Bible, is going to write himself as a good character and that God likes him, right?
You think that Josiah wrote Deuteronomy?
Again, that's not me. That's what modern Israeli biblical scholars say.
And that's based on the slang of the Hebrew at the time.
It's not slang. Again, like if I write a book today, 1,000 years from now, they'll almost certainly be able to tell roughly when it was written because of the things I say in the book, right? And the words that I use. When you hear Shakespeare in English, does it sound like modern English or does it sound old?
Sounds old, yeah.
Yeah. So all languages do that all the time. All languages are constantly changing, right? No cap. So if I write a book today and I end it with no cap, it's all real, they'll know that I wrote that after 2015 because nobody said that before that.
But the thing is, if it's constantly changing, then how can you know exactly which one it was? And so it's really all just speculation at this point. Plus, we have
Well,
in the Quran.
no, it's not just speculation. It's constrained, right? Do you understand the difference between random speculation and constraint?
I mean, I don't think that you can pin down a certain type of, accent
Okay.
slang of a Hebrew to a
Da
certain
Freak.
era in time, to
Okay,
a
well, let me
particular
let me explain it for you in a way you'll understand for sure, right? So, do you know there was a time when there was no English language? Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay, and do you know when English as a language first begins to form? Do you know that roughly? No?
I should know that, but I don't.
700 to 800 of our common era is when the Angles and the Saxons move to Britain and they start developing their own unique language, right? And some of the earliest texts we have from that are actually like translations of parts of the Bible from King Alfred the Great. And then we also have Beowulf, which is written in Old English, right? And when you hear Beowulf written in Old English, which is from what, 1,200 years or so ago, you can't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to you. Even though it is in English, it's no longer mutually intelligible, right?
Yeah, there's some people from England that are like that.
Okay, but if you came across a book that was written supposedly in Old English, but it was from 400 and was supposedly written in London, you would know that that was not true, because what language did they speak in London in 400?
German?
Latin. London was part of the Roman Empire, so they spoke Latin. So if you come across a book supposedly written in Old English in 400, you know that that's not true, because nobody spoke that language in London at that time, and that language didn't exist. So yes, there are some variables, but there are constraints. So when did Hebrew as a language form?
Oh, well, probably when Adam and Eve were like talking.
Yeah, that is not true. There's no evidence of Hebrew existing until at the very earliest 1000 BCE.
What, okay, why is that? Just because that's the first
Why is that? Because that's when the language formed from the previous languages that it formed out of, right? So
Okay,
English formed from Old Germanic. As the Angles and the Saxons left Germany and moved to England, they started speaking differently from the place they Saxony, and there's a new language that started to get called Old English. And before that, it was just the Old Germanic that they spoke from that area, right?
Okay, but listen, if you're talking about a particular type of Hebrew with a particular type of accent, an older type of slang or whatever attributed to this type of king, and you have scribes and you have errors, and it's speculation, dude. I'm sorry.
No, when languages are formed is not speculative. When you start writing a language, then you start writing in it, and that's when you start seeing it, right?
Yeah, but you can't.
People can't have a language that nobody writes.
Deuteronomy to an older, a late model Hebrew or Israeli, whatever, king, because also I put it in a back chat. There's more than one verse of the Quran that says that God gave the scripture, the Torah to Moses. Okay, so there's confirmation that's not in the Bible.
You're using the Quran to prove the Bible?
Yeah.
Because you believe the angel Gabriel gave it to Muhammad and he was telling the truth?
Well, he didn't give it to him. Muhammad received like any old prophet, Old Testament prophet would have received. But it's consistent in the word God.
And Muhammad memorized it perfectly with no mistakes, and so did every single other person for at least 50 to 70 years.
Well, no, he had like 10 scribes that were, floating around with him.
Nope. He did not have scribes. That's not correct. That's not the tradition.
Of course he did. He had like cousins and other family people that were there.
Nope, they memorized it. They didn't write it down.
They did. That's how it got written down, because the dude did not know how to read
Uthman is the
write.
one who took the recitations and wrote them down.
Who? Muhammad?
Uthman, not Muhammad.
No, he had many scribes.
Okay.
There's like
Honestly,
10 of them.
Let's move
Seriously.
on. Do you have a different question that's not based on the Quran?
Yeah, I'm just saying that there's confirmation. There's spiritual confirmation in the Quran that Moses wrote the Torah. Okay, so this whole Deuteronomy thing with King Josiah, it's bomb.
I just want to be clear. Are you a Trinitarian?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a Trinitarian and you understand that the Quran says you're going to go to hell, but you believe the Quran is accurate when it comes to Moses.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to a different topic.
But you're mischaracterizing, first of all, the Quran, and second of all, the Trinity itself. Then, the Trinity is a descriptor. It's not a God, okay? The Trinity is different aspects of the power of God. It's the one God, three manifestations. Doesn't mean that there's three gods, So even though the Quran was directly rebuking the Roman Catholic Church at the time by saying, do not say three, desist, whatever, it's still him. It's still the same God of Israel and Abraham. Anyway.
So you understand the very first Christians were the Marcionites, right? Do you know who they were?
I mean, wasn't it the disciples and
No, the disciples called themselves members of the way or the branch. The term Christian didn't really start until the late first, early second century. Like Pliny the Younger clearly knows the term Christian, right?
I don't think so.
These Marcionite Christians believed that the God of the Bible was the demiurge who had created the world by mistake, and that Jesus was the son of the God above, the God of the demiurge, and that he had come to save the world from the demiurge.
Where does this demiurge originate from?
The demiurge is the God of the Hebrew Scriptures in Marcionite theology.
Sounds bunk, dude.
That's what a lot of Christians today
Greek, and it sounds bunk, and it
sounds
doesn't
like
line up with the God of Israel and the prophecies of Isaiah and Yahweh.
But do you know what the very first Christian? Do you know what the very first Christian churches that we find in archaeology say they are? They say they're Christian Marcionite churches. The first one is Dura Europos.
Where is that at?
It's in Anatolia.
Which is Syria?
No, Anatolia is modern-day Turkey.
All right, so the first churches, okay.
So there were a lot of Marcionites early on before the, what you call the Roman Catholic Church formed, right?
I thought they were Orthodox.
So Marcionites are not what we now call Orthodox, right? They had a different understanding. And again, one group was the synagogue of Satan, right? Revelation is really clear that there's one group of Christians who are the synagogue of Satan.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure what you're saying is true in terms of these people existed or whatever. That doesn't mean that they had the concept of Christ and redemption and salvation and everything else correct.
So I don't
know what their beliefs were, but there was plenty of different Christians that were spreading around all over the place in Syria and all throughout Turkey and Greece and Macedonia. Okay, and even the North Sahara. Whatever they call it, the North African, Libya and whatnot.
Cyrene, yeah, sure.
right? So I'm sure they were all different. I'm sure they were all different sects. I'm sure they were all, uniquely different based on whatever little thing that they could separate themselves as a different group. I'm sure that's what they did, because that's just
Okay.
what humans do.
So how is it that you're sure that the Nicene Council got it right and that the Marcionites got it wrong?
I mean, the obvious Catholic answer would be because they, prevailed and they were able to spread and, metastasize across the whole earth or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, I don't necessarily buy into that. I would have to know their actual ideology to be able to answer that question.
Okay. Well, do you think rapid growth is a sign that God has blessed a group?
I mean, it could be, but I don't like to buy into that because it's just too easy to say that, and I don't think church authority should be based on that.
Okay, so it's possible that there's a small group of people who are like only 50,000 people who are the actual ones who have Christianity right and everybody else is wrong?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the thing is,
So what's the size that a Christian group has to be considered for possibly having God's favor and being right?
all of them. I think that they're all right.
So you
Okay,
think
so-
Mormons and Orthodox and Catholics and Jehovah's Witnesses are all right?
Yeah, I think you're going to find a lot of each of those in heaven, and you're going to be surprised. Okay, if your heart is right with God and you believe in Jesus Christ that He took away your sin and that He actually rose from the dead, yeah, you're going to be there.
What about atheists?
You're going to be judged according to the Scripture, and so you'll be judged. Some of you will be judged righteously, and that's great.
Okay, so then why would you do evangelism if people who are atheists can still go to heaven?
Because why would you want to have your flesh judged when you can basically skip that portion and still gain the power of eternity?
You're an annihilationist who believes in the purifying fire. You're exactly right. That is Pauline soteriology. Good job. That is absolutely correct. Paul definitely means that, but most Christians don't, right?
I don't even know exactly what that term means, but I know that your flesh is forgiven when you believe in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and after you die, if you didn't believe in it, you'll have a chance to be purified and then end up in heaven. I think that's
That's possible.
but
I'm not saying that's not possible.
sorry, Howdy, go ahead.
well, I was just saying, like, maybe you guys could wind down and let Jack have the floor. I don't know if Jack wanted to. Oh, he's just laying back. Okay.
And there's about 10 minutes remaining, people, but we can add a few minutes afterwards because we'll get some voting and whatnot done. Also, if y'all have super chats, make sure you get some super chats in. We'll make sure to have some time for those if there's any asked.
Yeah,
Just
Freak and
really
I have been back
briefly-
and forth too much, so Howdy and Jack talk. Yeah.
Well, Jack, do you affirm the inspiration of the Quran, and do you think that there's like multiple paths to salvation, like apart from Jesus or anything like that?
Well, there's many messages. The one God has revealed the knowledge and the wisdom through many, many different vessels. Different messengers at different times have brought these instructions and pointing the finger for us at the way. Sorry, I lost the question.
That there's do you know what religious pluralism is? Like there's lots of truths in other religions and lots of different traditions, even though they conflict, are inspired.
Yes. For me, I came to the conclusion, what rules over me? It's truly the truth that I'm aware of, what I know. So for me, truth is God. And there is truth found in every philosophy. There's even truth found in every lie. And if you take that as conceptually, well, then God, that's the way God is. God reveals itself perfectly and uniquely to each of us at just the right time, in just the right way. And so salvation for me, it means aligning with the truth. And then when we align with the truth and we feel a peace, we're not filled with anxiety or fear or resistance. In that peace, there's a wholeness. And that wholeness and rest, that's, to me, love. So it's the truth that leads us to love, and it's love that leads us to the truth. And I believe that's the significance of Jesus and the Father.
Do you think everyone will be reconciled to God eternally in the end?
This kind of ties to something I heard Curt say, and I don't fully understand, but to me, it makes sense that God is the beginning, God is the end. We are the experience in this in between. But even in our life paths, the opportunities are the beginning, the results are the ending. We don't control opportunities, we don't control results. To me, that's God controlling everything.
Do you think it's possible that you could be wrong and it's maybe God doesn't exist? Or are you like absolutely certain God has to exist? If God, like, it couldn't be anything else.
I'm pretty sure if I'm wrong, then this is just a dream. This is not real. But then again, that might be if I'm right too.
So
Because
it's okay, go ahead.
I came to this conclusion the other day, and it's the only thing that makes sense to me. We are individual thought forms that feel and remember, but we only exist within the mind of God.
So sort of like divine conceptualism, um we're in a dream, we're in God's dream sort of thing.
Possibly.
Really briefly, Da Freak, do you also, would you agree that, or I don't know if, because I don't know if he said that, but do you think it's possible that you could be wrong?
Wrong about which part?
Oh, sorry, the existence of God. Or do you think that you're absolutely certain and that God must exist? Maybe there's like, you think without God there's some sort of contradiction or something like that, or
Yeah.
it's just like totally inconceivable to you?
Based on my experience and everything, I would have to say that yeah, God exists. I don't think I'm wrong about it. Just unless my own testimony is lying to myself, right? Then I have to assert that yes, he's real. And there's a lot of different things that would also convince me. Like I say it in chat all the time. Biological symmetry. A bingo card Joe Biden dumb luck Powerball ticket is not making something able to work that efficiently. I'm sorry, it's just not.
Uh, for both of you guys, really quickly, do you both affirm or reject evolution? And do you think it's like necessary to affirm or reject evolution for there to be good?
For me, evolution is fine, but to the point of like class jumping or like species jumping. Uh, that's where it starts to conflict with the Bible, and that's where I would have to say that's where it stops. But God would certainly give life the ability to adapt to its environment.
Okay, so you reject like speciation. Is that your position, Jack? You also would reject speciation?
Possibly. I don't know. I don't have a clear definition of that word, speciation. But in nature, through people and science have identified patterns of development, and I think that is growth and could also be considered evolution.
Like, you don't think we could wind the clock back and, Homo sapien, Homo erectus? I don't know the exact path. Maybe Kurt could line it out a bit clearer, but that we came from like maybe like vertebrates and then fish and then all the way back down to single-celled organisms. Like, you're on board with that?
Even in that theory, I'm still in. I still think it includes God, even in the existence of some wild theory of evolution from single-celled organisms into these other developing forms. If that was possible, it's still within a divine order.
And my last question for both of you: uh, do you think that moral judgments such as X is good, X is bad, you should not X, X is permissible or impermissible, do you think that those judgments are independent of the attitude that God has towards them? So, like, for example, let's say torturing babies for no reason at all is wrong. Do you think that that's true? And do you think that if it's true because of God's attitude towards that?
I didn't fully follow the question. I'm not sure if I fully followed the question, but sorry.
I would say I can answer. You know, part of the reason that we're here, like as human beings or whatever, is the whole problem of evil. Eating the fruit of the knowledge of, from the knowledge of, from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Our testimonies are literally hashing out what good and evil are going to consist of throughout eternity. Okay, so like whenever we hurt somebody or they hurt us, those little nuanced things, those itty bitty little nuanced individual things that are infinite, are going to be used in the judgments of future things as they're if they're good or evil or not.
Okay, let me rephrase it. Do you think that it is true that torturing babies for no reason is wrong? Like, is that true? Okay. Do you think that
Yeah.
is true because God declares it? Or do you think that God would not want you to do that because it's true?
I would say it's because God also created that thing, and if we shouldn't be destroying what God created.
Okay. I could go a little bit, but I don't know if I can get much more out of that.
Can I jump in on that one?
Sure.
The idea of causing harm I believe it violates the order, because assuming God's qualities being the force of creation, well, if we align with creation, then we preserve, nurture, and grow life. We don't destroy life. And I've heard some theories on this universe that we exist within. In the concept of the one, there's one universe, there's one God, and that one being has produced us. And the law of this universe is it's fully balanced. It's a complete balance of good and evil, light and dark, whatever, positive and negative. And the law of the universe it's united, so it's unconditional love. That which is free to be as it is. And so the idea of causing harm on an innocent, well, that clearly causes harm to ourselves because of how we're designed. There's self-destruction mechanisms built into us with our guilt and our shame that come up. So the idea of the universe being one, we are one with the universe, and the universe is unconditional love. Well, love in itself, it's not a thing, it's a relationship. And so we are the relationship with the universe in every moment. Is that making sense?
Yeah, like love is awesome. The question is like, why is love good? Are you saying that love is good because it's in alignment with God's will and his stances and his qualities?
I would say that. And I'd also suggest it falls in line with what Jesus spoke. Love.
And real fast, so we did hit time, but I'll add a few minutes here. I said we had 10 minutes because it sounds like y'all have some more back and forth you need there. But Professor Hizzle Says thank you to all the members of the panel for their participation, and a big thank you to Taco for facilitating this event. Great discussions were had. Thank you, Professor Hizzle. That's greatly appreciated. And I'm adding 10 more minutes because it sounds like y'all do need some more back and forth.
Well,
And
that's where I was. Sorry. I was wrapping
Yeah.
up.
If
But I wanted Jack to ask something because he didn't ask a single question the whole time. So come on, give us one or two questions at least. Give us something.
yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Please and thank you, because I am curious. I don't know if I may first, not to eat up time, but thank you all sincerely. These have been great conversations.
you got 10 minutes to question people, Jack.
All right, let me do it. So, okay, how do you, if you come to the conclusion in the absence of God, then do you have an explanation, or you just have an open, I don't know?
An explanation for what exactly?
How and why everything is.
Well, I believe there's something. There's like causation. So I'm a causal realist, and I think that what exists is causally dependent on prior states of affairs.
Okay.
So, like, if I drop a ball and it hits the ground, it hit the ground. The explanation for it hitting the ground is because I dropped the ball.
I agree with that. The universe is made of cause and effect. One cause brings an effect, and it continues. And that which was plus that which is creates that which will be.
Right.
But you've narrowed down the negatives, saying you've concluded, I'm assuming you've concluded that there is no supernatural beyond the cause and effect, but there's an order to it. And so what's behind the order of the cause and effect, if you were to guess?
Well, you could ask something like, well, what explains like physical laws, like a standard model of particle physics plus gravity, and say, well, why do they obey these relational, like why do these hold or why do they obtain? Well, there's well, I can say that they're either necessary or contingent. Like if they're necessarily the case, then it's this way because it has to be this way. It could be the case that they're dependent on something like some more fundamental truth, um, or it could be that that there is no explanation for them, and they are just some brute fact about reality. In any case, about like the nomological laws, I think at the bottom of any of reality, even if there is a God, is logic. And so you could say why whatever if you're trying to explain something. Well, no matter what it is, I think it's going to at least be in virtue of the fact that it is itself and it's not something else. And it's either it's one or A or not A. So I think the foundation, like the bedrock where it all bottoms out, for me at least, would be logic. Even if there is a God as such, I could ask, is God God? Okay, then he exists in virtue of the law of identity. And I could say, is God not God? No. Then he exists as such in virtue of the law of non-contradiction. And is there a God or not a God? There is a God. Therefore, it also exists in virtue of the law of excluded middle. So that's my position on explanations where they bottom out.
I'm not sure.
Wait a second.
Please go ahead.
Because when you were explaining this in your opening, that you said that basically it was unsound in both scenarios, but now you're saying that it's possible, or that you're saying you actually sounded like you were just asserting it. So where am I getting that wrong?
So I think any transcendental arguments for the existence of a revelatory God are unsound because they're self-refuting. Transcendental arguments by the structure are analytic. So analytic arguments are arguments that are true in virtue of the definitions of the words, or you could think of like them being a priori, which require no experience. So if they don't require any experience, they don't require any revelation. If your God requires revelation, then he cannot be derived analytically or a priori. So any transcendental argument for a revelatory God is self-defeating.
Do you think that it's illogical that the molecule that's used for cellular respiration in animals is the same molecule that actually causes decay?
Oh, you're talking about oxidation. Illogical? No. Something being illogical is a statement of the form A and not A, or neither A nor not A, or A is not identical to itself.
Okay, but we're talking about O2, which is needed for life, and is also what causes death, essentially.
Yeah, that's not illogical, no.
It's not illogical. Okay.
So what were your thoughts on that, Jack? What did you have for a question or a comment on that, or did you were thinking about something else?
I'm not sure if I followed your arguments clearly, but this idea of God, truly, my logic prevented me from accepting that there could be a God for most of my life. And then I became broken. I was an alcoholic. I was ready to be done living. And in the rooms of AA, it opened my mind to the idea of higher powers. And I experienced a profound I had a profound experience one night, and it opened my mind. And so I started searching for answers, learning of previous saints, previous scholars, yogis, gurus. Mankind has had some amazing people, and that's who we are. We're all amazing people who were created to become. I'll wrap. One thing that helped me better understand the idea of God, the Trinity, and such, it was from the realm of science. That line from Tesla, you want to understand the universe, start thinking in terms of frequency, vibrations, and energy. If you consider God and even the characters, even us, we're all characters, we're all personalities. Every character, every personality has qualities, and these qualities are in line with our energies. It's kind of conceptual, but I think that's what we are. We're concepts.
So one thought on that is, you said you had mentioned AA, and understand that they stipulate that you have to believe in some form of higher power. Certainly, I understand in the utility or the usefulness or the pragmatism of certain false beliefs. There's actually a philosopher who talks about this, but I don't want to get into too much detail. But so, for one example, let's say that you have a gun, and you clear it, you cycle it, it's empty, unchambered, unloaded. You know that it's true that the gun is unloaded, but you should be trained, or you should train yourself to act as if the gun is loaded, because in doing so, you will prevent potentially disastrous outcomes. So I I don't know. Sure, I mean, I guess I could grant that belief in a higher power or God, or even the Christian God, can be beneficial to someone in lots of different ways. Maybe you could even say in
1 minute.
sort of communities or tribes or societies. Um, Unfortunately, that wasn't really the topic of the debate. It was whether or not it's true. So, regardless of whether it's more useful to believe that the gun is loaded, the question is, well, is it? And the answer would be no. Are we doing closing statements or
Yes,
questions
yes, we will
or
be.
okay?
Is everybody ready to do those? I can stop the timer.
Please.
Sounds like it. So, I believe the atheists went first initially, correct? Cool. So
Yeah,
the
I think we did.
atheists are going to close it out. So Jack and Da Freak, y'all will start first. Whichever one of y'all wants to start with your closing statement first, just go ahead and start talking, and I'll start your 8-minute timer.
Well, I'll start. Jack, sorry if I got wrapped up with Kurt a little bit there, but sometimes like if I kind of put something on the back burner, I'll never get back to it because I'll forget what we were talking about or something. So I hope that didn't infringe on what you were doing or what you're doing. So anyway, I love all these guys up here. I love chat. I love tacos. The only person I really don't love is that guy Fu or whatever. But that's a different thing. Anyway, I think of Howdy and Curt as like, they're like lawyers, and Curt would be a great like lead attorney in a trial, and like Howdy would be like the perfect observer, counteractor, counterpuncher. Like they make a really great team, I think, actually. So I just want to give props to those guys and whatnot. When it comes to God, Jesus, he fulfilled tons of prophecy. What he said and what Jesus means to God is actually something that we need to really consider, because we can think about whatever we think about him or whatever, but one thing that I learned when I was starting to learn about Jesus is you just need to think about what he says about himself. Like when you read the gospel, when you actually go through it, just take it for like at face value, like whatever he's saying about himself, like maybe consider that might be the case, and what he means to God. Okay, he's the one who reconciled God and man, and back to a working relationship because of the fall and the knowledge of good and evil, and all that other stuff. So, proof of God, yeah, it's out there. Archaeology is actually science, in major universities like the British Museum of Natural History, or any major university. Archaeology is a wing or a sector of that institution, and it is actually science, and they actually do look at biblical archaeology as a real thing. So this whole science is like an allergy to Christians is false. Okay, so but people have to spread their narratives or whatever. And it's just weird, but what are you gonna do? That has nothing to do with the evidence for God, but it just shows that I think that we're lacking overall in the country in terms of education and openness, and tribalism is still like a thing, I guess, which kind of sucks. But I think we just need to do better in terms of evidence for God. You've got Jesus, you've got State Farm, you've got the dollar bill, right? It says that God like it's not make believe, okay? It's not a fairy tale. Like it's actually in your currency. It's actually a part of your insurance policies. I'm sure those lawyers are not stupid that all work for the insurance industry, right? They go through all those numbers and they do all the predictions, and they figure out the lawsuit costs and everything else for like the safety belt that was defected on your Toyota or whatever. Like they know what they're talking about. So like when it says act of God in there, like it's not just something that's made up. Okay, so I mean, take that for what you will as like evidence or whatever, but like it's a thing. All right, so like all this like fairy tale fantasy made up, like come on now, it's a thing. Theology is a thing, just like science is a thing. It's all part of the overall human experience of the very complex things that we are. We learn, we work, we love, we have political strife, we have social strife, and we just try to all make the best of it at the end of the day. And I just think it's more wise to consider God and believing in Jesus, because you actually will have forgiveness of your flesh, and then you'll actually have the power to please God at that point. So it's just a win-win. And whatever happened to the church, whatever happened to, that got you away from Him, it wasn't God's fault. It was someone else being judged, and I would just consider that, and that's all I got.
All right. Thank you for the beautiful conclusion, Da Freak. Jack, I'm starting your timer whenever you're ready. All
Please do.
right.
To my partner, Da Freak, short notice, thank you for jumping in. To Howdy and Curt, thank you. The conversations have been amazing. The Christian God, does the Christian God exist? We covered a lot of things, from history to hypotheticals, trying to understand these concepts, and this is what it takes, honestly. It's kind of, I was just considering, what am I going to say at the end? Well, the reality is, does the Christian God exist? I'm betting my life on it. I have been. See, my life transformed, and it transformed before I understood Jesus, before I understood God. I had only just found a taste of love. And with a taste of love, after years of depression and unworthiness from the disease of alcoholism, that taste of love, it transformed me. And the more I started looking to know what is real, the more I started trying on the words that Jesus said. The idea of forgiving the unforgivable, loving the unlovable, being the one who's willing to stand up and lead. To me, that's what the example of Jesus is and was. It's like the prototype. It's the archetype for us to become. But we'll never become like Jesus without faith. And faith can only come through the grace of God and through our seeking. And seeking faith means stepping out of our comfort zones. It means kind of facing the things we're afraid of. And I've been doing that. I mean, my brand and trademark is live without fear. It's inspired by the teachings from the Bible, the example of Jesus. And I'm committed my life. World peace is my goal. So if I'm right and the Christian God exists, then following Jesus is the only way to be. And actually, you know what? Whether or not the God exists, you follow Jesus and you live without guilt, you live without shame, you live without fear. It's a no-brainer, man. But I guess it doesn't prove the existence of God. The results, though, that's where the signs of God can be shown. Just as with me and in the earlier conversations, there's been a lot of doubt in the minds of people about God. And it's part of a perfect story, the unfoldment of time and the evolution of knowledge, and it's brought us to where we are today. Sorry, now I lost where I was going to land at. The Christian God and the teachings of Jesus brings us to know inner peace. I found it for myself, and it really was by trusting the words he said. So for me, I'm a little bit different in a lot of the Christians because they follow the words of Paul more than Jesus and just accepting the words. But if you're going to believe something, if you're going to believe in something, let that good something become a part of you. So for the Christian followers, it's time we show the world what it means to have faith, to be the good neighbor, to be the one who's willing to wash the feet of another, to go out of our way and bring service and comfort to those around us. More Christians start doing this, there won't be any doubts in the world, because we'll also overcome the devils the devils of rule. And I think that's what we're here to do, guys. I don't think I have anything else.
Thank you for your closing, Jack. And I did put up a vote. It's does a Christian God exist? So if you think that the side that is affirming that is yes is correct, put yes. And if after this discussion you think the side that is saying no to that is correct, click no on there. But it's got 28 votes right now, and I see 66 people watching between different streams. So that's youtube.com/@realbreakfast-tacos. I know there's a few people streaming. So if you'd like to vote in that, pop on my stream, participate in that. That's going to decide the winner of this. Also, everybody do prepare some Bible verses, because a winning team, as always, will get a Bible verse read in the favorited translation. Now, the atheist side, it's your time for the conclusions. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll start the timer.
How do you want me to go first?
It doesn't matter to me. If you want to,
Yeah,
you can take
I'll
it.
go first. You started, so you can go last.
I'm starting your timer now.
All right. So when I started my opening statement, I talked about 3 problems with the Christian God. I talked about the Trinity being contradictory. I talked about the divine substance being incoherent. And then we talked about the fact that there was no stable God concept in the New Testament or the Gospels. And I think all of those objections still stand after our conversation today. But one thing that our conversation did make very clear was that everybody in the panel agreed that revelation is the way people get knowledge of Christianity. And so I have some real issues with the idea that revelation should be regarded as an unalloyed good. And in fact, I think revelation as a privileged concept can be quite dangerous, even though I know that people experience it all the time. One time, there was a man who got a revelation of Jesus appearing to him in a vision, and he got a divine commission to lead and teach the people the right way to live. His revelation grew into a large movement that spread across his homeland and then past the boundaries of his homeland and beyond it, gathering tens of thousands and then even millions and tens of millions into its orbit. This movement eventually raised armies, governed huge amounts of territory, and proclaimed that it alone carried the truth of God. But this movement did not bring peace or justice. It brought ruin. Its armies were crushed in battle, and in the aftermath, more than 30 million people died in the second bloodiest war in human history. Revelation had given this man conviction, but it did not give him good, useful truth. That man was named Hong Xiu Quan. He was a failed Chinese exam candidate who, right around the time of Joseph Smith, experienced visions in which Jesus told him he was the younger brother of Christ, chosen to purify China and establish the heavenly kingdom. He launched the Taiping Rebellion, which we've already talked about, having taken Nanjing, was then crushed by the Qing dynasty, where 20 to 30 million people died. You cannot use any method, and we talked about methods here, to determine whether Paul's vision was correct and Hong's was wrong. And we even discussed this evening that it's just using your sense data and your interpretation that allows you to tell which revelation of Jesus is accurate. But the people who joined Hong didn't know how the story would end. Both of these movements were far-reaching, both grew, but the outcomes were starkly different. So if success or growth validated revelation, then Hong's was truer than Paul's because it got a much larger number of followers in a much shorter period of time. But revelation is fraught with risk. People who receive revelations need to understand that they have no guarantee of accuracy, and that they are just as likely to be false as true, and that the only way they can judge them is to talk about them with other people and to get a consensus about whether this is a true thing or not, based on reason and logic alone, and not on the quality of their sense perceptions. That's all I have.
Thank you for the closing. And Howdy, let me know when you're ready and I'll start your timer. Oh, and real fast before that, there are currently 33 votes and there's like 66 people watching right now. So let's get some more votes on that poll. The poll is on my YouTube. It says, does a Christian God exist? There's a yes and a no option. The yes is Jack's side, Jack and Da Freak. The no is Curt and Howdy. Sorry, Howdy. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, you can start it.
Cool.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. I want to thank Curt and Jack, and especially getting Da Freak up on short notice. Thanks for filling in for the other guy. It was a great conversation. Definitely a good pace for me. Good tenor, good tone. Thanks for your time. I think everyone brought something to the table. Maybe we can continue the conversation or have something like this at another time. Okay, so my closing remarks on this one, my closing statements. One is that the scripture is plausibly corrupt. Jack agreed, and the lying pens of the scribe sort of lack of divine prevention of inaccurate transmission. So I guess it's not. I mean, it would only be evidence against the Christian God if you take it that the Christian God would bother to preserve the transmission of his written revelation. The other is that Da Freak and Jack seem to take it that there is truth in other religions that are conflicting with the New Testament corpus of Scripture. And so there isn't a Christian God per se. So, I mean, then there's no Christian God, certainly. It would just be God. And the Christian adjective is sort of getting in the way. We've also got it that, well, God doesn't adhere or obey logic, so he's illogical. And he's also unintelligible because you can't really say much about him. So, I mean, if he's unintelligible and unanalyzable, then there is no Christian God because the referent just simply never refers. One was I got that, well, the beautiful sunset is divine. And if you want to say, well, the divinity is God or a manifestation of God or his energies or something. And what you mean by God is like the sun or the beauty of a rose or the feeling you get when you hug your girlfriend. Okay. I would just say you're an atheist. I don't think that's what the Christian God would be. I mean, unless you're just saying that that's what the Christian God is. But I guess one thing I would note is it would be, if that's if like the sun is a manifestation of God, right? Then God is literally an active agent in like giving people cancer, and he's also blinding you if you look at him. Presumably that would go against the traits and qualities found in Christian literature. And even some of the qualities suggested by our interlocutors tonight. One that I think sort of irritated me was that the personal experienced ecstasy from prayer from God directly. So this would mean that God cares more about providing Jack spiritual ecstasy than sustenance for horrific child starvation. My only comment on that is that it's wildly implausible. I had an argument. Well, I guess it's an argument if you affirm moral realism, which is to say that the truth of moral judgments is fixed independently of stances that anyone takes towards the propositions such judgments express. And we've heard that, well, harming the innocents is true, but it's true in virtue of the fact that God's stance is his stances through his will or commands or acts are not congruent to that, or not goodness conferring to that act. It should be intuitively obvious that if God's stances were otherwise, such as commanding the torture of, I don't know, children or something, then disobedience would be morally obligatory. So if you're a moral realist, obviously you have to reject this, at least this conception of the Christian God. And the historical case, obviously, as presented, was entirely unpersuasive. We didn't really go over like the historical case for the resurrection. Even he was just talking about referring to particular locations in the period, and I think a couple of events. But I mean, Curt went over the lack of archaeological and artificial records for the events. But also he had to reject that old texts were also a blend of fiction and nonfiction. So just because there's something true in it doesn't necessarily, or doesn't necessitate the fact that theological assertions would be true. I mean, this should be obvious. Like if I write a book and I could write, millions of facts that are true, that's not going to entail that when I say, oh, by the way, God is also my left shoe on Thursday. That's just a non sequitur. And the near-death experience stuff that was provided, but then on cross-exam, it was admitted that it was non-replicable, conflicting, and indecisive. And so it might be evidence for God, but it's certainly not evidence for a Christian God as such. So that didn't work. He also had to reject linguistic dating. I'm not even sure like what that argument was, but he eventually had to admit that he rejects linguistic dating for Old and New Testament. He also had to reject macroevolution. So plausibly, like if you take it that Scripture is like it has some credence to it, it's going to cause friction with a lot of modern science. And so if you're going to affirm this Christian God, you're going to be at odds with a lot of things. Like it's going to be a heavy cost for some people, unless you're like a total allegorist, right? But it's sort of unclear. So I guess it just depends on like some conceptions of Christian gods where Christian gods are not allegorists in their writings or something. Anyways, my original point, I had other arguments too, but we didn't get into them. But they both admitted that it was possible that there was no God, and obviously, if you accept that, if the Christian God is defined as a necessary being, then straightforwardly you just run the reverse modal ontological argument, which has symmetry breakers in favor of atheism from weaker modal logics. But the last thing was that my big point was there's just like no reason to believe in such a thing because it's mysterious, sui generis, and ill-motivated. Even the interlocutors agreed to the mysterious nature of God and God being unlike anything in creation. So it's
30 seconds.
Totally different fundamental kind. And I'll just leave it as the audience to discern whether or not their motivations were good or not. I guess there's like the pragmatic false belief thing, but obviously it's false, and that's sort of was the crux of this debate.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the closing statements, everybody. Now, the audience vote is completed. We have 39 votes. The question was, does a Christian God exist? The positive side is Jack and Da Freak. The negative side is Howdy and Curt. And the winner is no. So the Christian God does not exist, as decided by the YouTube poll, at 82% versus 18 for yes. Now, Howdy and Curt, I trust you have your verses prepared.
I'll just do a callback to Mark 11:23, I guess.
All right. Mark 11:23. That's right. I like tell you guys this too. You go and tell this mountain over here, hey, get up. Go jump inside the ocean. If you trust God for make that happen, and no trust him only little bit, same time didn't gonna happen like that. And howdy?
Howdy's looking for one that has the word wahine in it.
Probably.
Howdy?
Oh, I was muted. Sorry. Revelations 22:19.
$22, you said?
Revelation 22:19.
All right. And if whoever take away stuff that God tell from this book, God gonna take away from his share of the real kind life that the tree give, and his place in the town that stay special for God, that God tell about inside this book. Beautiful verses, guys. That was
So real
Jesus
quick,
Show 22:19.
I didn't get a chance to thank, and I really didn't. I should have. Jack and Da Freak, it's been very pleasant conversation, very, very well behaved conversation with a lot of good ideas expressed in a non ad hom, honest and forthright way that I really appreciated from both of you. And Da Freak, huge props for coming up on late notice. That's very, very impressive. I agree with everybody else.
Yes, I appreciate you all hanging out, and thank you to Freak for popping up last minute. You are awesome, man. And that was a great conversation. Y'all all were great. Although tonight's master debaters, as voted by the audience, are Howdy and Curt. So congratulations on being master debaters, you two.
Congratulations.